patch 0.5 is just around the corner, and the question on everybody's mind is, what does this mean for Thorns? And when I say everybody, I mean everybody. I mean, just this morning I had Emmanuel Macron on the phone to me, and he said, "Hey Lily, can I play Thorns on the new Hunter's Ascendancy in 0.5? You know, the Spirit Walker? Can I play Thorns on that?" And I had to say to him, "Hey, French President Emmanuel Macron, you can play whatever you like, however you like. I don't think that's going to work very well, but you can do that." And I'm sure many of you have similar questions. So in this video, I am going to be telling you about everything I have found and noticed that I think will have an impact on Thorns in 0.5 in varying levels of cope. We're going to start with the least cope, and it's going to get pretty copey later in the video, but don't worry, just have a good time. Thank you. So to start off, we have the item that is pretty much the reason I made this video as a whole. I saw this item and I was like, I need to make a video about this item. And then I was like, a video about just one item might be a bit silly. And all these other things I also want to mention at some point, so I'll mention them now. And this new item is Searle's Grit. It is a new unique mace, and it is the first unique weapon in Path of Exile 2, or just in Path of Exile in general, that does meaningful Thorns damage. Now, I'm not exactly sure what it means. It says 113 to physical Thorns damage per active protective rune. Now, my theory is that the protective runes are going to have something to do with the skill, but the Runeforge version of it does say added physical Thorns damage per runic plate, and I have no idea what runic plate means either. That could be the skill? I'm not sure. Protective rune could mean defensive runes that you socket in your body, possibly. It could be something from the skill. We're not sure. We're still waiting to find out what runic tempering is. We do have a leaked version of runic tempering, which says that you can channel to imbue your armor with runic wards. So maybe that got changed to protective rune, or maybe that got changed to runic plate. We're not sure, but this leaked version of the skill says that these runes protect you for a limited number of hits and deal your Thorns damage to attackers. Now this means that when people attack you, you will naturally deal Thorns damage to them, but then also runic tempering will also deal your Thorns damage to them, which should in theory mean doubled up Thorns damage if this wording stays. What's also interesting is it just states to attackers and hits, which implies that it should kind of work while you've got this buff up like a Crown of the Pale King, which in theory could mean that we cannot use a Crown of the Pale King, although I think it would be better to use Crown of the Pale King and the hammer for just even more damage. Now, the current wording of the skill has a cooldown of 5 seconds and a maximum of 4 runes that can backlash every 0.5 seconds. This means that if every 6 seconds you channel to get the full number of runes, you have permanent uptime. But this does also mean that you have to channel every 6 seconds, which is a little bit awkward and clunky, and I hope that they are going to change some things about the skill before we see it in game. The ideal thing is just that you can have permanent uptime on this buff so that we can do as much Thorns damage as possible, because if we can keep our runes up, if let's say the maximum rune stays at 4 and it's 113 physical Thorns damage per active protective rune, I did the maths a few days ago, and if you permanently have maximum stacks up and you dual wield this mace, you can get 900 and something physical Thorns damage if it's the left version. If it's the right version, I haven't done that math specifically, but if we take, I'm going to say 40 to 80 just for easier math, and we times that by 4, we get 160 to, is it 320? Yeah, I think it's 160 to 320 per mace. So 320 to 640 if you are dual wielding, if you have 4 runes. That's pretty insane if that is how it ships. And I am very much looking forward to seeing what this does when it comes out into the game, because I believe that this could completely change the game Thorns in its current state. With the current skill and the current wording, I do believe that Spear will still be better than Mace in most situations. I have an interesting use case for Maces coming up, but even so, even in a Spear Thorns build, I still think it'll be very, very, very worth having this weapon in a weapon swap for bossing, because in a lot of boss fights you don't get attacked as much as out in the field, so you could actually make full use of that 0.5 seconds between each backlash, but you could also use this mace with Barb's 3 and something like Armor Breaker to have a very, very slow, very, very big hit. And I've done Barbs 3 against bosses before, and it hits like a fucking truck. The uptime's not great, but it hits like a fucking truck. And this hammer should increase the damage of a Barbs 3 bossing build by an insane amount. Even in a standard Thorns build, this should just give you the most fucking insane damage in a weapon swap. And I do have an idea of how to work this into being your main weapon, and that is the martial artist. Now, I have preached for the past few leagues that Monk is the worst class for Thorns. Acolyte of Cheula is in a tier of its own of garbageness, and it's worse for Thorns. And Invoker is an okay ascendancy, except for Thorns. It's truly terrible for Thorns. But I do believe that Martial Artist will actually have potential for Thorns. And that is because of one skill from the Martial Artist Ascendancy that we have been shown. And this is Hollow Form. Now, there is one thing that I have been looking for a Thorns build since 0.2. And that is a channeling strike skill for Crackling Barrier. Now, Hollow Form is not a strike skill, but it is a channeling skill, and it is a meta skill that you socket attacks from any martial weapon into. And this means that we can socket a spear, or maybe a mace, into this skill, a strike spear or mace skill, and channel this skill to trigger the strike skill, which, depending on how things work, and this is going to require some testing, but if it works the way I hope it does, and I'm going to test this on League Start because I'm very excited, should trigger Barbs and Quill Burst. Now, I haven't said what the skill does. When you channel, it creates images of yourself near a target, and those images use a socketed attack once and then vanish. Cannot perform channeled skills, cannot perform conditional skills, can perform strike skills. The radius on the skill is 6 meters. It creates 2 additional images when consuming a power charge, so we'd want to get power charge generation, but socketed skills have 30% less attack damage and deal 20% less damage. Now, we don't care about dealing 20% less damage because that won't reduce the damage of Barbs and Quill Burst. We do a little bit care about the socketed skills have 30% less attack speed, but if we're, say, getting 3 images of ourselves, I think we should be able to get more than that, but if we're getting 3 images from us of ourselves, Barbs 2, if I remember correctly, has 3 charges, so channeling this once would completely dish out our existing Barbs 3. So we don't really need this to be particularly fast, which means that we could use Soul's Grit to have that insane damage that this hammer provides, channel Hollow Form to activate Crackling Barrier for even more Thorns damage, have that hit with Bone Shatter or Armor Breaker or something like that on some enemies around you, immediately dishing out your full Barbs potential and doing insane damage. Now, Crackling Barrier is a mana stacking ability, and there's a lot of mana stuff on the right side of the tree. The biggest concern with building Thorns on the right side of the tree is defenses, because Martial Artist is in the evasion energy shield side of the tree, which is not very good for Thorns. We like our armor. But mana stacking Thorns is okay with not having the armor because of the insane health pool you can get from mana stacking. And Crackling Barrier gains damage from mana stacking. Now, I think we will forego Ice Tomb because it's just not very good. There are just better body armors you can use for mana stacking, but we should be able to get an insane amount of damage from Crackling Barrier alone, and an insane amount of defense with a recoup mana setup, which we can enable with not using Ice Tomb, and an insane amount of mana, which we can enable with not using Ice Tomb. I think this could get really interesting, but some testing required. I will not recommend this as a league start. However, I will be league starting this. I'll be doing Martial Artist, and I'll be getting that skill at my first Ascendancy purely to confirm that it works. If it doesn't work, I will be re-rolling into a Shaman, but I'm gonna just try and rush to the Trials of Sakuma, do the trials, and then say, okay, does this work? Yes? Cool. Mana stacking Thorns Monk. It is. This doesn't work? Well, shit and fucking piss. I reroll into Shaman. Everything about playing Martial Artist Thorns depends on this one interaction working, but if this one interaction does work, it will be pretty insane. And it's not like we would be taking Martial Artist for just one node, because there is a lot else that Martial Artists can do. There is Runic Meridians, which allows you to socket in total 5 extra runes. 1 helmet, 2 body armor, 1 gloves, 1 boots. Helmet means we can get extra crit chance. Body armor means we can get extra increased mana, if I remember correctly, and we can also just get lightning thorns to fill in the blanks. I haven't double checked what runes we can and can't use because there's going to be a lot of new runes added in the patch. Then Way of the Stone Fist. Gloves you equip have their base type transformed to Fists of Stone while equipped, and their prefixes and suffixes are transformed into more powerful related modifiers. Now these gloves give evasion rating and energy shield. We really don't like evasion rating on Thorns. It's like the worst stat we can get. But a little bit of evasion rating just from these gloves isn't going to be the end of the world, or we can just path around to Iron Reflex if we've got the spare points. But the energy shield can be converted into mana with Eldritch Battery. Amazing. And maybe, just maybe, there will be some really good mods that we can get on this base type, because it completely changes the prefixes and suffixes of any gloves that you socket. Now we have to wait and see what mods there are. Maybe there'll be a Thorns mod. Maybe there'll be a really, really useful and powerful attack speed mod. Maybe there'll just be some really good crit mods. We'll wait, we'll see, but I think it has a lot of potential. So Martial Artist is, I would say, the second most, just this is probably gonna work, but might not, but probably gonna work, thing for Thorns in 0.5. Now we go down the list to the third thing I want to mention to you, which is a little bit more cope, because it depends on things we don't know, but it is Olroth's Legacy. Now, Olroth's Legacy is going to be a new crafting resource that drops from either the new mechanic or expedition, which are kind of the same thing at the moment. But what it does is it destroys a unique item, extracting one of its unique modifiers and turning it into a socketable rune that can be put in the same item class. But this has a limitation. If you've been reading off the screen, you'll know that there's something I didn't mention. It destroys a Kolgurin or Ezomite unique item. Now, there are some items that we know beyond a shadow of a doubt are going to be Kolgurin or Ezomite. For example, Soul's Grit. This is part of the new league, the Kolgurin and Ezomite League. So Soul's Grit will definitely work with this. We're not sure if we want the mod, if we don't have the skill, but that we know will definitely work with this. So we'll definitely want to use this on a at least high budget Thorns build, because I think this is going to be very expensive. But what's also interesting is the base type for the Briar Patch boots is Ezomite _ base type, according to the database, according to PeeWeeDB. Now, this doesn't mean everything, because, for example, Svalin, which is a known Kolgurin unique, has the Karui shield base type. So base type is not confirmation that this is an Ezomite item. But the Briar Patch flavor text says the Druids walk the Growwood without fear. Now, Druids are Ezomite. So Briar Patch is almost certainly, but not 100% confirmed to be an Ezomite item. So Olroth's Legacy should work on Briar Patch and should allow us to get that Thorns critical hit chance in a rune. Now, GGG said that the numbers will be balanced to what is appropriate for a rune socket, so it might be reduced to something like 5 to 10% or something like that. But we've got two options if we do this. Firstly, we could take a Briar Patch and socket this rune into the Briar Patch for even more Thorns crit chance. Maybe we can get up to like 30, 35, maybe even 40% base Thorns crit chance, which will make it insanely easy to get crit capped. Or this could allow us to use other boots. This could allow us to use something like Trample Toe, which let me remember what that does. I really should have prepared better. This is probably going to get edited out anyway, though, or I'll keep it in because saying this is going to get edited out in a video is funny. But Trample Toe deals 30% of overkill damage to enemies within 2 meters of the enemy killed, which could allow us to unlock much better clear on Thorns, clear being something that Thorns has kind of been lacking. So we could go Thorns Trample Toe, or we could use Rare Boots for just better movement speed and better defenses. We have a lot of options opened up to us if we can extract that modifier from Briar Patch. I have been complaining for a long time now, and the Thorn Hub can confirm that Briar Patch is a little bit overpowered, and I do feel like this solves the problem of feeling forced to use Briar Patch. I mean, we're still going to use it in rune form, but maybe we can use other boots for once. And that'll be amazing. Now, getting a little bit more cope, I don't believe this is going to work, but we could maybe do this with Crown of the Pale King or Ice Tomb. Now, I don't think either of these are actually Ezomite or Kolgurin. I have no idea what faction Ice Tomb belongs to, but I did do a deep dive into the lore yesterday, and the Pale King figure, I saw someone on Reddit claim as an Ezomite figure. I could find no evidence for that. So I went into the lore documents myself, and I found reference to the Pale One referring to Beidut, a Beyond demon. Beyond is not in PoE 2 yet, it is in PoE 1, but they have nothing to do with the Ezamites or the Kolgurans and everything to do with the Templars. Or the Pale King, and this is my headcanon, this is mentioned nowhere in the lore, but could be Jamun-Ra. He is described as being pale, both in life and in death, and he is a king. So this means to me that we're probably dealing with an Oriathan item or a Faradun item, not an Ezamite or Kolgura item. But we're still going to hold on to the cope and see if we can extract the Crown of the Pale King mod with this currency. If we can't, oh well, we can probably still do Briar Patch. It's still probably really good for us, so it's not really that cope. And we can definitely do Soul's Grit as well. So keep an eye on this. I kind of have an assumption in my brain that this currency is going to be insanely expensive because, I mean, you can extract Svalin. You can extract, presumably, Lucky Block. So everyone's going to be using it for that before they even consider something like Briar Patch. So there's going to be an expensive currency, but it will be part of your best in slot endgame Thorns build. And it should be insanely strong if it works how I think it will. Now we take a massive leap in levels of cope. And I mentioned that in the reveal, GGG said that there are going to be new liquid emotions that allow for new instills that are not on the tree. And I would presume that these secret instills are going to be very powerful because GGG is going to want you to use the new and interesting and expensive liquid emotion to get powerful notables. And you know what would be a powerful notable that we could instill? I'm laughing at myself because this is insanely cope, but we could get Crown of the Pale King as a notable. If my cope is going to be fulfilled, we could get Thorns can retaliate against all hits as an instillable notable. Now, this is incredibly cope, but I'm gonna hope and cope because being able to not use Crown of the Pale King will just be so amazing that please let me not use Crown of the Pale King. GGG. If we don't get a Crown of the Pale King notable, I'm not gonna die. Thorns is still a strong enough build. We can still play the video game. Maybe there'll just be some sort of Thorns related notable that we can instill. There's gonna be powerful notables for everyone, presumably. So maybe there'll be something that references Thorns. I don't think GGG has forgotten about us. I think Soul's Grid proves that. So I think there could be Thorns support there. And if there isn't Thorns support there will almost certainly be physical damage support there for normal Thorns builds or lightning damage support there for mana stacking Thorns builds. So I'm not too concerned about there not being anything for us, but I just want to believe in the cope that is Thorns can retaliate against all hits as an instillable notable. GGG. Us a belief, pretty please, buy a donkey. And now we get to the lowest level of cope, which is new runes. And there is very, very little I can say about this. Of the new runes that we have been shown, and let me just double check this on PoEDB because I don't think I actually did that when writing my script. I meant to do that when writing my script, but I don't think I did. Of the new runes that we have been shown, I don't think there is anything that is actually good for Thorns. I mean, there's 1% to all maximum elemental resistances while on full runic ward. This is pretty good for Thorns. There's gain guard equal to 20% of maximum runic ward for 2 seconds. That's also pretty good for Thorns, but I'm hoping that we'll get something more directly good for Thorns. There has been a physical Thorns rune similar to the Greater Rune of Tithing in the game files for a really long time, but it is not actually in the game. So we are just going to have to wait and see, but they are adding a lot of new runes to the game. Some that will make crafting easier for us, some that will maybe just be something we can socket into our items that will just be good and last forever. We are going to have to wait. We are going to have to see. We're going to have to give it time. But I have a lot of copium for this, actually, that at the very least, there will be one rune worth socketing. So we must keep an eye out on these new runes, because 0.5 is looking like an insane patch. I have never been this hyped for a Path of Exile 2 patch, and there is so much stuff for Thorns going on. I almost wasn't going to league start Thorns because I missed Soul's Grit in the announcement video. But the more I looked at Soul's Grit, the more I was like, I have to do this. I have to be the sacrificial lamb that tells you whether or not Soul's Grit is good. So expect my build guides when we have the patch notes. I'm not going to give you anything too speculative beyond this video and maybe some other random rambling and ranting. But I think this is actually going to be an insane patch for Thorns. Keep an eye for the patch notes. Keep an eye for my breakdown of them and what they mean for Thorns. I'll see you in the next video. Remember to like and subscribe. Thank you all for all the support over the last league. I'm sorry I completely disappeared off the radar for 5 months. I was dealing with some health issues. I'm still dealing with some health issues, but I really got bored of not making content. I love making shit for you guys. So yeah, thank you all for coming here to listen to me ramble, and I hope I will see you in the future. Goodbye.